And baby, I'll sip you like a smooth, sweet wine. Get lost on an island and I'll find you, if it takes me all night. 'Cause love ain't no sprint to the finish, and I plan to prove that I'm right. So baby.
All right, and welcome back to another episode of Live in the Studio. We are here with a very special guest, Stephen Santos.
How are y'all doing?
Welcome.
Thank you.
I feel like I always do everybody's introduction for them before they get the opportunity to, so I told myself, cutting it off, introduce yourself. Tell us what you do.
My name is Stephen Santos. I've been writing music for about 18, 19 years and have gotten just some really fun opportunities while doing that, and have just loved music more in the later part of my life than I ever did younger, and just the power of it. And then also within the last 6 years started writing books, which never planned on doing.
Yeah.
Kind of fell on me, but I just love doing that too. The power of words in people's lives and all of our lives. And it's funny, I find that with music and with books, it's more of a mirror for me than anything else. I mean, I hope it blesses other people and encourages others, but really it's the opportunity to look at myself in other ways.
Well, you kind of touched on it, but I wanted to kind of ask you just to start off. So what's your background in music? You said you've been playing 18, 19 years. Is that, or you said writing or playing, or kind of tell us how you got into all of it?
All of it. So when I grew up, when I was born, my parents said I was born with a soccer ball in my hands. And I loved playing sports. My dad was musical. My sister was musical. My mom even played guitar. That was more like, hippie music area. And, but I just never wanted to play anything except sports. And then I got into college, and a lot shifted for me during that season. And it was in my last semester, a buddy had a guitar he was in my suite, and I just saw it. And for some reason I was like, I want to pick that thing up. And I asked him, I was like, hey, can I borrow that? And he's like, yeah, sure. So I went and I just started plunking away, literally like no guitar lessons, didn't know what I was doing. And I started like just
Google.
No, it was before Google. Trust me.
From the store, or like how do you learn?
I literally would. This sounds crazy, but I literally would put my finger on a string and play it, and I would hear that note, and then I would be like, okay, and then I'd find another one close by, and I would play that, and then I would like literally made up chords as I was going. I don't suggest it. But then, after that, so I maybe like made up one chord progression through that. And then after that, I'd have a buddy come over and he'd be like, oh, this is a G chord, play this. It's a lot easier or whatever. And I remember I even played one of those chords for this guy who was one of those keyboardists that's just like a math genius, knows everything about music theory. And he looks at me and he's like, I don't even know what that is. And I was like, me neither. From the moment I started making the sounds, the words started coming. And that's really what intrigued me by it was now this platform to be able to write a story through music, or to be able to say something encouraging to someone.
Now, like you say they came together. So do you remember like some of what your first songs, like, so that would have been what you said, so 18 years ago. So how old were you when you started writing?
20. I was in between 20 and 21.
So you started at 21.
Yeah.
How does it feel now? Because you're how old now?
40, almost 41.
Looking back, and like, do you still kind of look back on songs that you wrote 20 years ago fondly, or are they like not your favorite anymore? Like what's the sort of the hindsight on 20 years of songwriting? What do you look back and?
That's such a good question, because
I'm curious, because eventually I'll be here, and so this is why I love talking to you.
So I think it's fun to look back, and I have the very first EP I ever put out, which was with a band, because in the beginning it was like, oh, okay, this is going to be alternative rock.
The band is always the cool idea when you're young.
And I loved it. And I had like multiple guitars, and they were tuned differently. Nice. And it was like, how else do you do a show without multiple guitars?
Gotta have five
crazy
on stage.
tunings. And so I remember looking back at that EP, and like I've listened to it throughout the years and been like, what in the world for some aspects of it. But then the other aspects and the core of, I feel like all the songs that I've written is there's always been a story behind them. There's always been a connection point of it's an emotional response from me.
Mm-hmm.
So no matter what it is, no matter if it's a news article that I read or a phone call from a friend that someone close to them has passed, or a story that someone has told me about something that I'm not connected to at all, there's an emotional response that takes place. And almost always I have to get to a pen and paper and a guitar.
Yeah.
There's almost always this, I have to release something. And that's what's been neat for me. But, you know, you may ask this later, but like some of my issue or some of my experience with writing has been about simply for one person and one moment.
Yeah.
You know, I've had the opportunity to sit in a living room with an older person and play a song for them. I've had this multiple times. Not even just an older person, but play a song for someone who's going through something that was literally just written for them and never play it again.
Yeah, those are unique times. I have a song I wrote like for my grandfather's funeral, and I think I played it
at the funeral.
I played it at I played it the week before and sent it to my grandma, and then she was like, "You're playing that at the funeral." And then after that, I don't think I ever played it again.
Yeah.
So it comes up every year on like a memory or something like that. And I'm like, man, what a cool, I mean, like sad when it comes up sometimes, but also just kind of unique thing that you can really just attach a song to one thing.
Right.
And that's it. Yeah. It doesn't need to be for the stadium tour or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, I think as songwriters, you want, or I guess maybe as artists, like, you know, like maybe starting out, I always envisioned like, oh, it's going to be a band. It's going to be huge. And like these songs are going to be, but then the more I write, the more I'm like, okay, I filter out like, you know, 10 for every 2 that I put out, you know, like, which is kind of crazy. I didn't expect that when I started either.
Yeah.
So do you ever write on other instruments, or is it all kind of guitar driven, or?
Yep. Piano is the only other one, but that's a funny thing about me. 'Cause I am not one of those musicians that's like great at all, you know, like just phenomenal at this stuff. I can pick up stuff. Like I picked up banjo, you know, mandolin, ukulele, and love those, and can play enough to write a song on it and maybe do some recording. Yeah. But I always try to find other people that are good at that stuff.
You are probably the least, like, I'm trying to find the best way to say this, but you're the least sort of, I don't even know what the word is, like,
just say
not competitive. Like you're not when, like, so Stephen and I just finished up doing 3 songs together. Yeah. And in terms of people that I've worked with, you are the most, like, as long as the song sounds good and the arrangement's good, like, you're not bothered for it to not be you playing or whatever. And like a lot of, I think, I don't know if that just came, were you always like that?
No, see, that's what's fun.
Okay. So like, does that just come with time?
Yes, it does. I think it does come with time. I think it's getting to the point, because in the beginning I had all the equipment, I had everything, like, and I was it. And I would pull in a violinist or a cellist, you know, but I was determined, like, this has to be this way, and I'm not gonna put anything on the vocals. Like, this just has to be so pure. And over the years, there was just kind of this breakdown of, that's great, but it doesn't seem to connect to people as much as if I have something that's better produced than what I can do.
Did you feel like, and this is curious because I wonder this about myself sometimes, like, was it when you were doing all of it, did you feel like you were doing too much? Or was it like
there
trying
was a
to
part
let go
of
it?
Yeah. And there was a part of that, it was like, no matter how hard I try, it's not doing what I want it to do. Yeah. Like I'm banging my head against a wall trying to get this perfect sound, and at the end of it, I'm like, this still isn't what I want.
Yeah.
Something's missing.
I mean, from a mixing engineer's perspective, you never, like, it's tough. You sort of realize, like, eventually, like, no matter how good you get at mixing a song or editing through stuff or whatever, like, you never feel like it's perfect. Yeah. And so it's this really obscure thing where I think recording sort of lost a little bit of the ability to be raw. Like, you look back at recordings from, like, basically late 90s, like, and there's a ton of imperfections in music recording, like all the way down from like grunge and rock and stuff in the 90s to like 80s and 70s, where you listen to the recordings and like they're not perfect at all.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like now the production mindset is so much, and I'm totally guilty of this, of like how perfect can we get it?
Yeah,
you know, that's the goal. Perfection is the goal.
500 takes later, it's like let's be done.
But you sort of like, the more songs I've done, the more I recognize, like, even if there's something about this song that's like quirky or you know, slightly what I would say is like in a vacuum not ideal, it's like that's a characteristic of who it is. There's a guitar I play that's the first guitar I ever bought in a store. It's a $400 acoustic guitar. And I put that guitar on every record, even though I know it's not intonated perfectly, because it's me. And I write every song. I think out of like 100 songs, I've probably written 80 of them on that, you know? And so I'm like, it's who I am. And I think that now the more I got into it and just got over the idea of like, how perfect can we make it? I think the imperfections actually kind of create the differences that are pretty unique in records. So,
well, and I think a sign of maturing as a musician is realizing that if you don't put anything out or don't work on anything until you're perfect at everything, you'll never do anything.
Ever.
So something I struggled with for a long time was like feeling like, oh no, I can't perform live, or I can't, you know, record anything on an album because I'm just like not, you know, Beyonce level yet, and it's like you never will be.
Yeah, I watched a thing the other day that said something about like if you're not willing, something about like being willing to fail, and like if you're not willing to fail, then you won't get better. And that was, you know, one of the big things that I think in production took me a while to just be like, you just got to do it.
Yeah.
All that to say. So you did that first EP. How many records, like songs, have you released, you think, over time? Because I know we've talked to you about how many you've written. You said, I think the last time we talked, you said you've written maybe like close to 200 songs?
Yeah.
So how many do you think of 200, like how many have come out on like platform or EP?
So now we're talking years ago.
Okay.
And the world was different then.
Okay.
But my first album, the first EP was called Story of My Life.
Okay.
And
sounds like a One Direction reference.
It was right at the same time that Story of the Year like came out.
Oh, okay.
And I was like, dude, you like completely playing off my thing here. And so that was the first one, but we didn't we made CDs, but we didn't put it out.
Okay.
And then a couple years later is when I put out She Was Once a Girl.
Okay.
And that was a really, really fun project. It was all stories of friends that I had, some who had gone through drug addiction, some who had gone through situations of abuse. There was one actually focused on the issue of cutting, and had written songs to each of them from God's perspective, basically, on their situations. And so was able to release that, and there was a teenage girls conference that we were able to get a CD into every girl's hands for free as they were leaving at this conference. So that was the first real one that we, got out there. And then the next one was an album called Believes, and that was written for a church that I was actually attending at the time. And the pastor wanted to do a series based on the fundamental beliefs that we have, the Bible, who Jesus is, salvation, all those things. And so I wrote a song for each one of the sermons, and then we ended up producing it and putting it out, which I love that one. It's just very simple, but really just hits on the main themes of, what we believe. And then the next one was called Midnight, and that one, and these are all pretty full length. I think there are at least 10 or 11 songs for each one of those. That one was put out in order to provide people a personal worship experience. And so there's actually some talking in the middle of the songs, and which I normally wouldn't do, but I didn't mean it to be this like, hey, everybody buy this is going to go big. Right. I just meant it for like, I need some time with the Lord, and I need someone to kind of help me into that space. And that's what Midnight was really focused on. And then after that, the next one was God Said, and that was a 5-song EP. Came out at a really tough time. But I mean, even that, it was miraculous how that came out. And then this next EP, this 3-song EP that we're putting together, and soon Take My Time will be released. It's actually, release date is July 29th.
Awesome. excited for that one. That's I remember sitting actually at my house, and you played through all 3 of the songs. I think you played through maybe one more, but I can't remember.
Yeah,
I think you
did.
played like one extra one, but I remember sitting listening to all of them, and then like I think you played Take My Time last, and I just remember being so giddy over that song. Like as soon as I heard it, I was like, oh, that would be so fun. Yeah. Comes out July 29th.
Yep.
And is that what you're playing this morning?
Yes. Yeah.
Too? Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. Do you have a favorite, or actually let's start with this. Do you have a least favorite song you've written?
So yes, and that's a tough one because it was meant to be a goof song.
They always are.
It's called Teddy Bear.
Okay.
And it was written for a good friend of mine when I was in my like late 20s. And it was his birthday coming up, and he had just gotten engaged. And so I wrote this song called Teddy Bear just as this fun song. And it's this mix of like spoken word and pop and a rap section.
Spoken word,
and I've
pop,
only
rap.
rapped in 2 songs.
Nice.
And this was totally just a joke. So that would be the one that I would not let people listen to unless if I knew I could trust them.
Every week we've been asking people sort of like what are their like what's like one of the earliest songs you remember writing, and either through a question like we just asked right now or through that one, we usually get like, oh, I wrote this song when I was like 10, or one of them was about laundry, right? Was Chelsea's?
Yeah,
I think it was about
That's
laundry.
Awesome.
Soul laundry, I think is
Yeah.
what she called it.
Nice.
And she's like, and every time you have that conversation, there's sort of this eye contact that
Like,
happens
don't
where
make
people
me
are
sing
like,
it.
I'm never playing this song. If we go any further with this question, I will get up and leave. Like it's this really like fun little moment. But I have them like that too. I wrote a song called Sunrise when I was growing up. Honestly, I don't hate the melody, but the lyrics are like corny as all get out. So yeah, it's nice to have ones that you can lock away and never let out.
Yep.
What about a favorite one?
I have 2 favorite songs, I'd say, but well, it depends on what you're asking. Are you asking what's my favorite one to sing, or what's my just favorite overall lyrics?
How
and
about
stuff?
both?
Okay.
One of each. We'll give you 2.
Okay, all right. Winged Prayers is a song that I haven't produced and put out, and eventually I'd like to. It's on the ukulele, and the flow of the song just feels so endearing. But it's a story song about what prayer looks like in the spiritual realm. And so it's this picture of like prayer being like these light bulbs that are flowing up through the sky, and why some get to heaven and why some don't. And the tagline is, maybe it's about who you know.
I feel like you have to be a seasoned songwriter to write a song. Like that's like what's the word they use in painting where it's like it's an abstract idea, right? Like trying to like, I don't think my mental imagination has made it there yet. Maybe one day. But that's cool, man.
I think that's my favorite one, just as far as writing a song.
Yeah.
As far as singing a song, there's one that I wrote called Image, and it's God singing to us, and he talks about, I made you in my image. And the first half, it's kind of a painful song, but the first half is all about how God creates us and makes us in his image and all this stuff. And then the second half is all about how we make him in our image and our response, and how sometimes we do that. But I love the song because it's got this kind of like soulful, it's not pop, it's not total blues, but it's soulful in between.
Okay.
And I just love the vocal lines on it. So I love to sing that one.
Is that one that people can go hear? Is that one out?
No, that one's not out either.
either.
So in the future, Billy.
Yeah, let's do them. I know, listening to at least I've heard the God Said EP. It is an EP, right?
Yep.
Yeah. And then hearing that, and then obviously like I just worked on the last 3 songs you've done. Yeah. And I think stylistically, there's always been a little bit of it. Well, at least God Said to this next one, like you can definitely hear the relation between them.
Yeah.
And I think, but I know in talking with you, sort of like a little bit of a dive into more of a country sound has happened for you lately.
Yeah.
At what point are you doing more country in the future? Like, what's the genre? Sort
Evolution.
of like happening. Where are you at with that right now? I guess is the best way to say this.
That's a good question. I don't know how I got here. So probably because we're in South Carolina.
Okay.
Moved to South Carolina, and that's
true.
what happens.
It's true. It does.
I was always, other than my first rock experience in the beginning, I went really more towards folk music just because it so lends itself towards storytelling.
Yeah.
And that's really what I love and what comes out of me easily. So then I was just focused, most of my stuff. I had that, that genre that I was focused on. And then back a year ago, I connected with this guy who produced a lot of the instrumentation and stuff. Well, all of it for God Said, and then some of the instrumentation for this album or this latest EP. And we were talking, at the beginning of this, and he was like, what do you want to do with this? And I was like, I don't know. And out of my mouth, literally, I don't know how this came out of my mouth, but I said, I think I want kind of like a country feel with this. And then I'm like, what did I just say? Well, he goes and starts working on this stuff and comes back with the music. And I'm like, this is incredible.
Yeah.
And I love singing to it. And I love how it fits the lyrics. Everything just made sense. And then the feedback that people have given me, they're like, man, this is like, these fit really well.
I really like it. I think when I first heard it, just like producer's ear, not necessarily even like anything other than just like listening. And it was pretty blind. I mean, the first time I heard your songs, I heard them. We talked like after church on a Sunday, and then I looked up. I was like, I wonder if he's on iTunes. So I like look it up or whatever, find the God Said EP, and then I remember I don't know if it was like a month or two later we connected, and you came over and played through your songs, and I really kind of my first like hit of like, oh, what does this sound like, or what would these evolve into? It was like somewhere between what you already said, which was folk, and then like country, but almost like Americana was like how I described it, I think, to you at first.
Yeah.
I think you have a real unique blend of those, kind of like an ability to move between all three. But then obviously like you keep it God-centered, which I think is really cool too. So
people around here love their country music.
Yeah,
it's true.
We used to gig in like breweries.
Oh,
and
we're
stuff
really
a
bad
lot.
at. Well, yeah,
And
we
we
have a problem.
don't cover like any country music.
No, it's not.
That's
We
just
don't know them.
We don't know them.
That's,
And there's
it's
this
scary.
this guy inebriated walked up to us and was like, "Do you know this song?" We were like,
No.
He's like, "What about this one?" I'm like, "No."
No.
I'm like, "I can do Tennessee whiskey, and
That's
that
all
is
we
it."
had.
there you go.
That's all-
Hey, that really is all you need.
Well, it's weird because gigging in the Carolinas, like you get a lot of country requests, and we were not ready for it
No,
when
we
it
weren't.
started. We were like, oh no, like we just got asked for 5 different songs and we didn't know any of them, and we had to like offer up like a Tennessee whiskey and like hope that was enough for them. And it was just, it was an interesting thing.
Yeah, if we
starting out
ever
for
went
us.
back, we'd
Yeah.
have to learn a couple extra country songs, I think.
That's funny.
So Image was your favorite song to perform live,
Yeah,
you said. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about like sort of music as a whole. What is music to you? Why is it important? I'm going to take it back to like overarching.
Yeah. There's a lot to say about that.
Yeah.
I think it's a lot like when I write novels. It's an opportunity and a platform for people to meet something that they couldn't meet any other way. And that's what I love about music and writing books, is that I can go have a conversation with someone and tell them, hey, this is why following Jesus makes your life better. These are my experiences. And like, I love self-help books, not self-help, but like I should say nonfiction books.
Yeah.
I love nonfiction books because it's to the point, right? Here's what you need to do to change your life. Here's what you need to think about, all that stuff. Great. But music and novels, and I, think they're pretty close to each other, kind of make this backdoor entrance into your life. And before you know it, you're either tapping your foot or you're nodding your head to something that you may not have fully processed yet. So that's why I love music, songwriting, book writing. It gives you an experience first, and then the truth is there. And you've already experienced something. Like that's why the one book, the Compass series, I love so much. And I've given to a lot of people who don't follow Jesus because they'll have an experience with him through the first 3 novels of it. And then at the end, they're like, oh, that's what that experience was about. It's also very dangerous. Like that's the thing, is when you can give someone an experience, they can end up believing something that's not true based off of that. So, songwriters are given this responsibility to not just write and throw out stuff just because we feel like it, but to pursue truth even amidst the art.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think, I would say that there's obviously songwriters who don't feel that way, like, and I kind of, not to, I think that's a really, really great and admirable conviction. I think for me, I look at songwriting and yeah, I definitely think there's obviously songs that lead you to conclusions that are, there are songs about hopelessness, right? And I'm a person who believes you should have hope, right?
Right.
There's something unique for me about it that I think, personally, like whatever that song's about, and I definitely feel what you're talking about. Like there's songs I don't put out because I'm like, I don't know if that's going to help anyone, like, and so there's this really unique thing for me personally on like, what do I feel like I should write? Why am I writing it? We were talking about songs you don't keep earlier. Like I have songs that are just like utterly about the most depressed moments I've had in my life. Yeah. And I've thought about putting them out and then I go, maybe not that one. And then there are some that I think are raw and are real about life that I hope, that people look at the context of my life, like, right. So yes, I might have a hopeless song, but also I spend every week either in or around serving or doing stuff at church and leading worship or playing other songs or whatever and writing. Basically, like my hope is that there's a juxtaposition between sort of those songs that are dark and then what I choose to do as a person, even though that's going on inside me at certain points. And I think that personal responsibility of like how to do that I've seen it fall a little differently on every person. And I hope that those are so that different people can be connected with, you know what I mean? Right. Like if all of us had the same exact convictions as songwriters,
same audience,
we wouldn't all be writing to the same person or connecting with the same people. But yeah, I definitely hear what you're saying. I mean, even when you're young, like one of the first examples of that is like, how much cursing are you going to put in your music? Right. I think every songwriter or a lot of songwriters think through that question. Like, is this going to be explicit or not? How accessible do I want this to be? Right. And you kind of realize like, if you do certain things, there's just going to be some people that won't hear it or whatever. And I think in general, even if it's something that's tough, I hope that people just have something to relate to and that even in the end that's a positive thing because they know that they're not by themselves in certain things. So yeah, and I think, and you and I have had this conversation before, sure, because I wrestled with, I'm putting out a 3-song love song EP. Like that's not typically what I write. Most of my stuff is very faith oriented and faith based and encouraging people in their journey. That's just what's always come out of me. But I will say this, it seems to me that it's very similar to how we perceive different churches. And it could very easily, like, in the Christian community, it's easy to be like, oh, that church is seeker friendly, or that church is super conservative, that church is Pentecostal or charismatic. Like we have these perspectives on all of this, but what I've found is that God will use all of these different places to help people on their next step of their journey. And so like you talking about someone writing an incredibly depressing song. Well, if there's any sort of glimmer of hope or continuance on moving through that depression in that song, that might be the thing that reaches somebody that's in a dark pit. Yeah. Somebody that would never listen to a song that I've written because it's not where they're at emotionally. And it might be enough to get them to the next step, to the next step, to the next step. Well, in the context of I always think about it too, like the context, right? Like yes, I might put out a song, but what do I surround it with? It's not just, and I think honestly, it's like, yes, it's going to sound maybe a little cynical, but it's also just good marketing, like on a very like pull back level. Like if you just put out a song, but there's nothing for people like to, you can put a lot of things around that to say to complement it, So even if it is something that's super tough, there's a way to sort of give people even something to go on of like, yeah, this was a really dark time in my life. That was the song we just did, was Demon in You. And when we did that song, I think what I said was like, for me, I wrote that really at a time where I was just trying to write cool bar songs. And it was about like kind of
Living
who
with
you
yourself.
are and what you've done will always be with you. You can't shut it off. Right. So you have to face those things. And there's not a lot of like extra hope going on in that song.
Yeah.
And honestly, I don't think I had a lot of extra hope going on when I wrote that song. I was really I wasn't even thinking like that, you know?
Yeah.
But now I look at it and I go, like, when I listen to that song, I try to remember like who I was yesterday is not who I want to be today.
Right.
And like, that's a positive way to take a song that was probably not an overly like hopeful thing. I mean, it talks about, and I wasn't even drinking at the time. I was like 19, but it talks about drinking, you know, and like there's some things going on where I was just writing it with a darker tone because I wanted a darker tone. And so it's interesting, but I think songwriting definitely is a influential tool, which I think is kind of your point, like to sort of steward that well. Yeah.
Do you feel like when you write a song about like someone or something that's going on, does it just like word vomit? Like it's just like it already exists and you put it on paper? Do you feel like you have to think about it a lot?
I know it depends, but that's probably most of my interactions with songs that come out of an emotional experience. Like one that's not like that is I'll Raise You, and that's on this 3-song EP. That song, literally, I was walking in the woods out back of my house, and I was almost back to, I would walk every morning with my dog, and we just go and hike through the woods. And I'm on my way back, and all of a sudden, into my mind just pops this picture of two people playing poker and the phrase, I'll raise you. And actually, the first, it said, I'll raise you too, because I don't know, I don't play poker. Yeah. And I thought that's what you said, I'll raise you too. Like you raised one and I'll raise you too. And then, right. And so I'm like, oh my goodness, I think that could work. And then I go right up, grab my guitar and just start writing, and it just pours out. Yeah. So that was a little different because that's just started with a phrase and wasn't really an emotional response. I had another song called, I think I called it Michael's Song, about a boy who was about 13 years old and was diagnosed with cancer. And as soon as I heard the story, I was connected to their family. I just had to get this out. And it was all about how people would stand in the midst of facing this giant in their lives. And so,
is that one out?
No, I never put that one out. That was one for him, you know. It was one of those situations. So it's almost like it's right there, all of it, and then once I start, it just pours. Yeah. And I've had some crazy experiences too, where I've written songs. I mean, you've probably done this in like 20 minutes. Yeah. And you're like, weird. That just came out.
That's such an interesting thing to me because I'm so not oriented that way. I have to think anytime I write, I have to think really, really hard about it. So it doesn't come naturally. Maybe I find that so interesting that people can just like, it's almost like it already exists. Yeah. And you're like, I just have to make it physical on the page.
Yeah. They vary. Like sometimes usually I know if I'm going to finish it or not, but then it's like, it's either like a 20 to 30 minute thing or it's like a 3-hour thing. Yeah. You know?
Or 3-year thing.
So I like the 30-minute ones. It's like nice because like you like feel, I don't know, for whatever reason, like it's exciting. Like that you like, wow, like that's just here like now. Wow. Pleasure. Like there's a song on the Relevant record called Holy Ground that like literally I remember we were sitting there like after a day of already tracking and I'm playing I started playing like the chord that's like the opening chord in that song, and Chelsea was we did that record together, and so I was like, as soon as you leave, I'm probably gonna finish this. Like, and it was this weird sixth sense. Like it kind of feels like a sixth sense in that way. Yeah. Let me ask you this. We're getting lower on time, but I have 2 more questions for you. One, let's start with this before I switch off that. So what's the hardest season that you've had to write through as a songwriter? Like through 18 to 19 years. Is there a time where either it was really difficult to write, period, or a song that you had to write that was super hard to write? One of the 2, whichever kind of stands out.
Yeah. How personal do you want to get?
As personal
That's
as you're
up to you.
comfortable. That's really more of a, I don't mean to knock on a door I'm not supposed to. So whatever, however comfortable you feel.
I feel like my life is, I try to be as much of an open book for people as possible because there's, even in the tragedies, there's beauty.
Mm-hmm.
And so that song, or that album, God Said, that EP came out, and 3 of the songs on that I had written during this 6-week period where there were false allegations made against me and my kids were taken away for 6 weeks. Mm-hmm. And so I wasn't able to see them for 6 weeks, and it was a terrible season. And everything, came back like it should. And,
Yeah.
And everything ended up being fine, but it was interesting to me, and the whole album, that whole EP was even recorded and produced in that 6-week period. And I remember at the end of the 6 weeks looking back and being like, why in the world would this come out of this season? Like that was a season where I should have been stuck in bed, depressed, trying to find anything that caused me to survive. And I felt all those feelings. And yet in the midst of this, there was just this drive of, okay, no, I need to do the next song. Okay, no, I need to do the next song. And the funny thing is the whole album is about God's justice.
Yeah.
The whole album is about things being set right in place. And us being able to just rest on the fact that God is always going to have the final say.
Yeah.
And it's not about my perspective. It's not about me. It has nothing to do with any of that. And that's, I think, one of the things a lot of people struggle with is they think, well, it's just what you believe and you need to stop believing that. I'm like, I can't.
Yeah.
He's the one you should be mad at. And the first song on that is God's on Trial. Mm-hmm. And it's about people taking God to court and blaming him for everything. When the reality is he's here opening his arms to love people. It's just really hard to accept. There's literally a switch in our brain that needs to turn in order to be able to accept all that he's offering.
Yeah, I think it's hard to look at the world and then have hope sometimes, for sure. Like, you know what I mean? Like you look out and there's a lot of really dark and difficult things. And I think that is something that I feel like I've always felt super sympathetic with, like for people, like when I listen to like the first bands that I was listening to, and even today, like I don't really sit around and listen to, I've said this on multiple times, I'm trying to not repeat it too much, but I don't listen to a ton of Christian music. Mm-hmm. Because to be honest with you, a lot of times being out in the world, like person to person, sometimes it's not as relatable to me. And mm-hmm. I know I might be a little bit, depends on the community that you're really, in the Christian community. I think I say that to people and sometimes they're a little surprised. Mm-hmm. But I really don't, like, unless I'm in the spot where I'm like trying to actively like come close and like be in worship. Yeah. If I'm driving my car, if I'm working, if I'm working, I'm usually listening to whoever song I'm working on. But if I'm if I'm editing or if I'm doing something like, usually I have a secular song on, and for me, I just have always found them relatable in that way. Mm-hmm. So it's always really like I look at it and I think being sympathetic, not in the sense that like you're approving of everything that goes on in the world, because mm-hmm. I don't think I don't approve of everything that goes on. I don't think anybody does. Right. Like who approves of everything? No one. But you look out in the world, and there's a lot of dark things in it. And so I think that when you take that and then you're writing songs and doing what you do, and trying to like still point to God even through those times. Mm-hmm. That's one of the things that I really find admirable. Whether you do that through the song itself or whether you do that, kind of like I was talking about earlier, through your life, even though all this is going on. I think pointing it back to God is obviously the best thing you can do. Okay, so let me ask you this, and then we'll kind of close with this. And this is just sort of a curiosity one. Mm-hmm. How did you go from writing songs to books? Like I've heard you describe it before as like almost a similar process. I think that a lot of songwriters,
you can't understand why that would be a similar process.
What's your opinion on that? Do you think that all songwriters could be book writers? Like, how to make the jump, sort of.
I'm not the guy to ask. Probably.
Just tell us how you did it.
Okay,
we'll just go with that.
So it's kind of a crazy story. I never wanted to write books. I wasn't like, yay, because I was like 30-minute song. That's my deal.
Yeah.
And I was in the middle of the woods in Northern California on a backpacking trip, last minute trip, by myself. I had groups ahead and behind me, and I was sitting there, or I was hiking, and I was just thanking the Lord because it was gorgeous, this hike. And all of a sudden I had this thought come into my mind, and out of nowhere, and it wasn't a good thought. And I was like, what in the world? And I was like, I don't think that's, something I should think about. And so I got rid of that thought. And then I had this conversation in my mind with the Lord about that thought and everything. And at the end of it, he said, I want you to write a book about this. And I'm like, seriously? I was like, I don't know. And, my journey with Jesus has been sometimes he speaks, sometimes he doesn't, but I don't get to choose. Like, I just kind of receive when he is.
Right.
And so I went into a cafe when I got home and tried. And for 7 days, I just wrote. And at the end of the 7 days, I had the first novel of that series. And
1 week. Okay.
1 week.
So it's either 30 minutes to 3 hours for a song, or like 1 week to 6 months for a book.
Right. And I remember just sitting back after I was done and being like, man, this was quite the experience. It felt like that, but it was more exhausting because, it's just pouring through. Mm-hmm. And then I ended up writing the rest of the series after that. And I even rewrote the last book a couple years later because I knew it just wasn't finished. And then when he gave me, it was like a light bulb. Oh, that's what it needs to be. It was like, oh my goodness, this is incredible. And, so far, all the responses of readers have been just, they experience something through reading them that they weren't expecting to experience, an encounter of sorts.
So from like a writing perspective, does it feel like the same process, just extended? Is it similar? Is it different?
So how when you're writing a song, you'll get like mental images sometimes that pop through. It's like that, but they're bigger.
Okay.
So you get like almost something that shows up in your mind, and you're like, okay, I need to figure out how to create that in this bar,
Yeah.
Or in this verse line.
Okay.
And so you do that, but with a book, you have a story pop up. At least for me, this is how it works. A story will pop up, or an aspect will pop up, and I'll be like, oh my goodness, that's what needs to happen next. How do I fit that into this? And then you're creating, and through stories.
Like you have almost like, for lack of a better word, like a structure sort of reveals itself in the sense of like when you write a song, right? Like you have like verse, chorus, bridge, chorus. It's like the most standard structure possible.
Right.
Is that you kind of like a bigger version of that, like almost, and you're like trying to fill in different things that need to be there?
Not for me, but probably for some people.
Really? Okay.
For me, it's literally like you said, like
random,
vomit.
Random.
Like it just starts coming, and then I'm like, oh yeah, and then this, and then that, and as I write, more comes.
Okay. So you're placing it within a structure as you get more and more. And more
yeah,
and more.
But honestly, I don't even know, like...
Well, eventually you organize it, right? Because it comes out in a book. That's all I'm saying.
I just write. That's all I do. I would be terrible at one of those workshops.
Yeah.
Like if they ever asked me to come to a writer workshop, I would be like,
so do you have an editor then? Like at the end of that process, if you vomit it all out, like does somebody edit them and put them into a structure?
No. It's already written.
Just written.
I write it, and it's where it stays.
Okay.
Because it's story, so it just fits that way. Now, what I do is, my mom is actually a court reporter.
Oh,
and
awesome.
she loves reading, so I send it to her first, and she goes through and
like proofs it or whatever.
Proofs it, and then I send it to another couple people that are really good at editing and kind of test readers, and then I send it out to a group of test readers.
Awesome.
And so by that time of that, everybody's caught, and people give me feedback of like, I don't know how this fits and all that.
So no is the answer to your question. There's not a straight song to book pipeline.
Okay.
We'll call it the God
I'm
pipeline.
Just, trying to answer that question for my fellow songwriters out there. You might not be book writers, novels. I don't think they're going to be my
try
thing.
it anyway.
I'm just now trying to get to where I'll read them more than I will write them. Let's wrap up with this. Tell us about the song you're going to do today.
Okay, so I'm going to do Take My Time. It's the one that's going to be released here soon. This song was split up. I started writing it and wrote about half of it and just loved the flow of it and everything. And then I met a girl that I'm dating now, and things are really going well. And after I met her, I wrote the second half of it. And it was a song. It started out as just a song of how do I really want to approach love and relationship? Like, I know what the world says. I know what the world offers. I know what the majority of people end up falling into. And it's just this like emotional roller coaster.
Yeah.
But how do I really want to approach, the next relationship I'm in? And so that's what it was birthed out of just this cry for maybe love isn't like we've been told it is. And maybe that's why all of our relationships end up so screwed up. Not all, but the majority of them, because we're taking what we see in media, what we see in movies, and we're saying, oh yeah, that's how it must be. I have this incredible feeling, and then that's it. Yeah. It's the right person. As long as I find the right person, everything works out and all this stuff. And I don't think that's true for a lot of people. And I wanted to offer an opportunity for people to just step back and think, maybe there's a different way to do this.
Than what the world would have you do.
Yeah.
So that song comes out July 29th.
Yeah.
But you're gonna get to debut it here, which is pretty cool. Actually, I'm really excited about that. We've had this song. I heard it maybe 3-4 months ago now.
Yeah.
So super
Just
excited to bring it to you. Your most recent single, "From the Trees," is out now. People can go look that up now if they want to hear more.
Yeah.
And then "Take My Time" comes out July 29th, which actually
I'm pretty sure that's the
it's
same
the day this goes live, actually, which is pretty cool. So
that's awesome.
we'll wrap it up here, but without any further ado, here is "Take My Time" by Stephen Santos. Stephen, thank you so much for being here today. It was great to have you, man.
Thank you.
Clouds move fast when a storm is brewing. Birds hurry south when winter is falling. But I just wanna take my time. The young race towards getting older, hard to rush towards growing colder. But I just wanna take my time. And baby, I'll sip you like a smooth, sweet wine. Get lost on an island and I'll find you, if it takes me all night. 'Cause love ain't no sprint to the finish, and I plan to prove that I'm right. So baby, look in my eyes. I'm gonna take my time. I've heard the fools rush in and play love like a game. Oh, but I just wanna take my time. 'Cause love is a holy moment, and pain comes in when you waste it. So I just wanna take my time. And baby, I'll sip you like a smooth, sweet wine. Get lost on an island then I'll find you. If it takes me all night. 'Cause love ain't no sprint to the finish, and I plan to prove that I'm right. So baby, look in my eyes. I'm gonna take my time. Oh yeah. Come on now, take my hand. I will build you a promise where you can stand. And if you'll let me lead, I will move with your heart, just like a slow dance. And baby, I'll sip you like a smooth, sweet wine. Get lost on an island and I'll find you, if it takes me all night. 'Cause love ain't no sprint to the finish, and I plan to prove that I'm right. So baby, look in